Hello and welcome to my latest video. In this video we're going to be continuing to paint the Sharksquig, also known as a squigosaur, and we're just going to be looking at the exhaust that's coming out of his body here. So if you look at the wet palette on the top left, the colours that I'm using for a start at least are going to be very similar to the colours that have already been used on the skin of the shark. Now the nice thing of this is it means you can carry on painting it without having to change over the colours on your wet palette, but you do have to bear in mind that you're going to be painting it in a different style, so the surface looks and the final result will look very different to what you've already painted. And I will be adding one extra colour later on, and it'll change the whole look of it really, just so that it stands out a bit more as well. Just to reiterate what colours I'm using, so we've got neutral grey, basalt grey, dark sea grey, pale grey blue, black. I've used German grey in this one. I think in the Sharksquig skin I mixed the colour up, but it's just basically a darker grey colour. And I did actually find it was a little bit too dark, so if you see here I've got neutral grey right in the middle of the wet palette and the German greys to the right of it, and I've mixed the two colours together as well, so just to give me another sort of step for getting in the transitions. Then at the bottom of the wet palette you can see there's some Mournfang brown as well. So the first thing that I've been painting here on the exhausts is the big primary highlight and a couple of little extra lines for some secondary bounce highlights. Now I'm painting this in sort of a rough, dirty chrome effect, and the reason I say that is because it's rough and dirty because I'm not going to be painting it to a perfect finish. You know, this is a fairly quick model that I'm trying to paint, and I don't want to be spending a long time making a flawless chrome finish on it. So you'll get all the nice effect, it'll look nice and shiny at the end, it just won't be perfectly blended. But this big highlight down the middle, this is the main one that you need to get right. All the other ones are just sort of random marks that you put on there, and they can be fat or thin or whatever really. But that one big highlight, you can hold it under a lamp, and again you'll see sort of where the highlight will line up. And the important thing to get right is that you can see that main highlight while looking at the golden angle of the model. So you're going to be able to see like the face of the squig. I know it's hidden behind the wet palette there, but you see the face of the squig and all the teeth and like all the nice details from the best angle. Well, of course you have to paint the rest all the way around on the chrome effect all over the exhaust, but as long as you get the golden angle to look really good, then the rest of it sort of falls into place around it. And you can see these little secondary bounce highlights again that I'm talking about. I say secondary bounce highlights, I mean they're just they're random reflections. So if you imagine a chrome finish, it just means that it's got like a mirror-like finish. And what they would be so they'd be like the reflections of the rider and the ground and all sorts of things like that in it. But because of the shape of the surface, so it's a big cylinder, they all kind of like get stretched out and distorted because of the curve of the cylinder and then the long shape of it as well. Now, if it was a perfect cylinder, so if you got a chrome cylinder and you looked at it outside, you'll see that you can still kind of work out the shapes that are on there, but it really depends on how much time and effort you want to put into painting the chrome effect. This will give you the implication that it's chrome and shiny, but without having to paint distorted things like battlefield shapes on there. Of course, if you want to, you can do that, but I would recommend getting some chrome reference for that, just to give you a little bit of an idea, because some of the shapes will still be you'll be able to understand what they are, but again they'll be really stretched out and long. And just to go back to that primary highlight that goes straight down, you can see it also goes down onto the curved part that connects into the body, so that all has to line up, apart from obviously where it curves round, and so it lines up it will line up perfectly from one angle, and then as you rotate it a little bit, it will come out of alignment because there's like a raised surface and like it steps down. So, but that's correct. You can only look at it from one angle to get the perfect line on. So don't worry too much about that. As long as from the straight on view of it that it lines up, then that's all right. You can see I'm also just painting in a few marks on the big block of metal sort of engine compartment that's just below the exhaust. I'm guessing that's some part of the mechanics for how the leg works. That's not going to be painted in chrome, so I'm not going to finish that for this video. The main focus of the video will be the chrome effect, but I just wanted to show here that again I'm using the same colors, the same grey kind of going from like black to white, grey colors, and you get a different surface effect. So the marks on this little metal surface are more sort of scribbly, kind of closer to the look of the shark skin. Whereas if you look on the exhaust pipe itself, you can see there's obviously the long horizontal lines going along it. You can see that in the way that I was moving the brush around as well. It had that very wiggly sort of look to it. Whereas if you pay attention to when I put the marks on for the exhaust, then they're a little bit more controlled, and they all follow the same sort of direction. Now, if you wanted, you can have this bendy part at the bottom, have a few more scratches and things on there, because it is connected into the body somehow, so it must have some residue from there if you wanted. But I'm not going to bother with that. The nice thing about the bend though is it's going to have a really big shiny point on it, right? Because it's kind of a hard bend, like someone's just done a bend on one point rather than being a nice slow curve. It's a very kind of angular bend to it. So right on that bend point there's going to be a big shine point, which rather nicely lines up with the strong primary highlight that goes down the top of the exhaust part as well. And you'll see that that having these bright spots on there, they're the points that will really make it look shiny and non-metallic. This big highlight as well, it is kind of important that you get a fairly opaque highlight line on it. The other ones not so much, they don't matter again because they could be reflecting anything, but this bright shiny one, this is really the one that's going to make it look like it's a shiny surface. Also, when you build your model, you probably want to do a slightly better job than I did. If you look at about a quarter of the way down from the top, there's a slight kind of, it's where the sprue is still connected to the model, and I cut it off, and I didn't use a scalpel to smooth it down and get a perfect finish on it. It's a little bit annoying because it's right on the big shiny part, so it will stand out a little bit. It ruins the effect slightly. To get that, if you wanted a flawless finish, you do have to make sure that the surface is very well prepared, so that you don't get these little bumps and details that sort of work against the effect. Here you can see I'm starting to put in some Mournfang brown, and I'm painting it over the top of some of the grey marks that were already on there. So the Mournfang brown will represent the ground reflecting up into the metal surface. You can see here I'm doing it on the lower pipe as well, and already just by adding that little bit of colour, it's kind of really pushed the look of it being a reflective surface. I'm in a moment going to be adding as well some Calgar blue on top. I'll talk about that as well in more depth when I do it, but just adding that little bit of subtle colour instantly helps to separate it out from the model, which is a bit strange as well because there is Mournfang brown glazed into the skin, but it's quite soft looking, so it's not an opaque strong colour, whereas on the pipe itself it's much more saturated. And also I'm going to be painting over it slightly with the greys as well, so it changes the colour slightly. You can see here I'm again going over the top of that big bright highlight and just picking out some of the edges as well. The edges are also one of the main points on the exhaust that you have to paint these strong edge highlights on, because the light catches on the edges stronger than the smoother surfaces. So by having these hard edges in there, it really does give the indication that it's a reflective surface. So I did mention earlier that I was going to add some blue in with the Calgar blue. Now Calgar blue is a slightly weaker colour. It's a little bit translucent, but because I'd already painted a light grey colour on there, the Calgar blue goes on top of it and it works like a heavy glaze. Now, if you wanted, you could mix in a little bit of grey with it. That would desaturate it as well. I didn't want a very strong blue. That's the main thing. If you go too strong with the blue, it'll stand out nicely. The chrome effect, it all works fine from a technical standpoint. But the thing is that the blue gives a very happy, sunny day kind of vibe to the model. And I don't really want that. I want sort of like a more moody, aggressive feel to it. Now you can use other colours other than blue. Just say, oh, it's not a blue sky. You could have like greens, like a dirty grey green or anything like that. I'm pushing more for like a dirty grey blue sky, but I just pushed the blue element a little bit more, just so, one, so you can see it clearly, and two, to give a little bit of contrast against the sort of reddy brown colour of the Mournfang brown. But if you wanted, you could add like a yellowy colour to it as well. I quite like adding ice yellow to non-metallic metal colours, because that kind of gives an indication of a sun on it. And really, I was almost tempted to add some ice yellow to this as well, but I thought it might be a little bit too close to the colour of the teeth then. So I didn't use ice yellow on the teeth, but the actual colours used sort of all blend together to give the same sort of feel to it. So again, just picking out these, it's only really the lower edges of the exhaust, the holes on them, that you need to catch. Don't paint the circle all the way around. And again, just going over. So the blue colour that you see, that's more at the top, and there's like a very strong band that I keep going over and over with the colours, and this makes it lighter each time, just stepping it up a little bit. I think it's up to dark sea grey now that I'm going, but I will be taking it all the way up to white for this bright highlight line, and you'll see the line gets slightly thinner each time, and every time you take the highlight lighter, it makes it look shinier still. You can see here as well, I get like a slight blob on these little holes. That doesn't matter at all. That just gives the impression of a glare, a shine that's on these hard edges. And I'll be pushing that blob effect even more when I go over it with the white at the end. So don't worry about things like that where you get little blobs of paint and things. It actually just adds to the realism of the effect. It's tricking your eyes into thinking that there's a glare going on there. So now I'm up to pale grey blue. You can see again going over this main highlight point. So I mean, I keep going over it, but this is the most important highlight part on there, and this is the one that you're taking up to the highest highlight. Don't paint all of the grey reflections up to white. That's quite important. It's only the primary light reflection that you want to take that high. You can take one or two of the others maybe close to it, but don't take them any of the other ones up to white. But it's important to note that I'm talking about the long horizontal lines going along the tubing, not the edge highlights. The edge highlights can be taken up to white, and that will kind of work with the shine as well. But all the those long horizontal reflections, just don't take those up to bright white apart from the primary one. So you can see there, it's not perfectly neat. There's kind of a little bit of wobble and things like that. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you can get that kind of chrome look to it. You can understand how it works. So really from this stage, all it would be a case of just refining, making it look neater and neater. And really for this, the neater that you make it, the better it will work in terms of chrome. Normally for non-metallics, what you actually find is if you make things a little bit too neat, it can lose a little bit of the non-metallic effect. But kind of weirdly for the chrome effect, as long as you've got the strong opaque marks on there, the neater that you make it, the more sort of realistic it looks. And you can see again the edge highlights. If you look at these, you don't have to paint them all the way around the same brightness. You can do them so like a pale grey blue or even a dark sea grey kind of look to them, going all the way around, and then just take it up to white where it goes over the primary highlight points. This angle gives you a little bit of a better look at the bounce reflections and the ground reflections in there. So you can see where I've painted on the Mournfang brown. And this will just go over a little bit more for getting that colour in there, but not having the colour too strong. So you can see I've painted the Mournfang over one of the grey colours, but then I've gone straight back in. I've picked the Basalt grey, and I haven't washed off the brush in between. So I then paint it back over, and it just gives it like a muddy, browny grey kind of colour. So I didn't really want the strong saturation sort of look to it. It keeps it the atmosphere of the model, that kind of dark and grungy look to it, or just adding a hint of the ground colour being a brown and the sky colour being blue. You can see I've also spent a little bit more time just neatening up the other highlights. You can see what I was talking about now, how it just looks better if you spend a bit of time neatening it up. And also that highlight that I was talking about, this one here on the corner, the bend, how much of a difference it makes having that there, just having that focused highlight to give the shine point. And if you look also on the edges of the holes in the exhaust, you can see I took the white as well, and I went over them and put the little blob dots on there. Again, they sort of enhance that shine, that glare kind of effect. And the neater that you get, the better that it looks. But just because it's neater doesn't mean to say with these little blobs it has to be exactly on the line. Like, you can go over the line, but you're controlling exactly how it goes over. And that's pretty much the end of the video. So hopefully that it was just quick and informative for how to paint like the nice chrome effect. I think it works fairly well for a quick effect, and if you wanted to take it further, you just use exactly the same principles, just make it neater. But anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.